If you're trying to live a more intentional life, you have to understand your behaviors, and you have to understand how motivation stands behind that. So let me give you a very simple way to look at this in terms of how the brain looks at behaviors, or how it prioritizes behaviors. So imagine your brain is one big whiteboard, and on this whiteboard there are lots of post-it notes, and there's a post-it notes for each of the things that you might do next, each of the behaviors that you might do. Now, a behavior is an action. It is more than that, but keeping it simple, your behaviors are the actions that you take, and it is also moment to moment. In other words, lined up behind the scenes are another 100 things that you might do next. I will have a cup of coffee. I will put my coat on the latch. I will go to the toilet. I will make love to my partner. I will shy away from this dog that seems a bit vicious and is walking towards me. And all the time, each of these post-it notes is being prioritized up and down the list in terms of, right, what am I going to do next, moment to moment. So high on the list, at the top of our priority, are always things. I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 different areas. Always highest on the list are our instincts and our inhibitions. They're always in the 90s. With this dog, the dog is coming towards us, doesn't look too nice. What am I going to do? I'm going to walk to the other side of the street. I have an instinct to shy away from this dog. And if we said it was 1 to 100 in terms of the priority, and each of the post-it notes was on this list, down the list, either 97, 92, 91, 26, then always our instincts and our inhibitions would be really, really high on the list. And so will our urges. If you're a smoker, the urge to have a cigarette when it comes to that moment will be very, very high in terms of the list. It could be in the 80s. And just below that, then, we have things like habits. And again, you could say that habits are smoking, but a habit that I'm going to do my exercise because it's 9 o'clock and I always exercise at 9 o'clock and this is my habit. And so behind that are things like our wants and needs, satisfaction, things that give us pleasure. If you have a headache, this desire to have a headache tablet, a paracetamol or an aspirin, is really, really strong. Pleasure, in terms of, again, we could use the analogy of things like sex, but even wanting to go and have dinner with our friends, wanting to read the book that I've got the last 5 pages to read. So again, if we said instincts are in the 90s, things like urges and habits are in the 80s, and then our wants and needs are pleasure, satisfaction, these things are in the 70s and are always really close when we are thinking about what we're going to do next. They're always making the cut. Now, the other things, the conscious things, things like our values and principles, the things that are important to us, our life intentions, which is where I come back to this idea of intentional living. These are far away. These are down at the very, very bottom and always lingering at the bottom. If you believe that you have an intention to get a new job, then a lot of the time, unless you bring it up on this list, higher up the priority list, it lingers at the very, very bottom, and we all know about this. Same with our values, the things that are important to us, our principles. Unless we recollect them at that time, they languish at the bottom of our priorities. And so simple things like if you believe that gossiping with other people is something that you shouldn't do, when you go out with your friend to have a cup of coffee and you're sitting there having a drink with them, you go, oh, I need to tell you this story. What a great story. Only if you remember, hang on a second, I don't want to gossip at that moment. If you don't, then you will carry on and gossip. So the things that your values, your principles, your beliefs, these things are quite low down. And they will only come to the fore if at that moment you think about them. And it's the same with our intentions, with the things that are important to us, the long-term things, the things that are not immediate. But what we're trying to do with Sprint Living is that we're trying to somehow understand how to get them up on the priority list. Now, we don't want to do intentional stuff every moment of every day, but we want to make them higher up on the list. We want to think about them more. And this is how you live an intentional life. So what you really need to do is you need to understand, how do you influence your behaviors? And you influence your behaviors by understanding how your mind works and how it motivates, and about the whiteboard and the post-it notes, that your mind is all the time prioritizing items. And this is motivation. And the question is, how do we understand our motivation? How do we influence our motivation so that we have better behaviors that are focused more on the things that are important to us, our intentional living?